Well, it's been a pretty full and busy day around here today, but I thought I'd take a few minutes to fill you in on what's been going on. I spent the morning building a form for a concrete pour that we're going to do over by the house next to the deck, and it will help control weeds next to the deck, shed water better, and just be better for the house and the deck in the long run, neaten everything up. And eventually we're actually going to pour concrete all the way around the house as a fire mitigation tool to keep weeds from growing up within about 3 feet. So it'll just be a concrete sidewalk all the way around the house. And anything that is planted next to the house will have to be in pots or planters that are easily pulled away in the event we have a fire. So that's a long-term project, and it should be a really good thing. It really helps a lot to do that, but it takes a while because I'm mixing it all in a little mixer, and we'll let you see a little of that next week when I actually get the sand and gravel to mix with the cement to make concrete. After that, though, we took a little trip to the coffee shop for lunch, came back to the shop, and I've been working on Holdfasts. So I got a nice little batch of Holdfasts done today, some of the plain ones, some of the leaf-ended ones, and with any luck I'll get those packed up later this afternoon, this evening, and they'll be able to go out in the mail tomorrow to their new homes. So that's good. It might knock half dozen orders off my list if I get all these in the mail. You might actually hear it raining right now. We're actually getting a little bit of rain. First time in a long time. I'll be surprised if we get a quarter inch or more, but it's way better than the hot, dry, and windy that we've had for the last several weeks, so I'll take whatever we can get. The weather gets a thumbs up today. I'd subscribe to this, but I don't know how. Anyways, that's not really what I wanted to talk to you about today. You read the title of the video probably before you clicked on it, talking about the rules of blacksmithing. People out there right now say, rules? There's rules to blacksmithing? Yeah, I'm afraid so. And if you didn't know there were rules, you probably haven't been paying attention, because if you go to the online forums, you watch a lot of YouTube channels, you read some of the books, there are people who are pretty adamant about this is the way you do it. It's the only way you do it. Now hopefully you've been watching me long enough, you know that I'm trying not to be too much of a stickler for self-imposed rules or do it my way or you're doing it wrong or anything like that. But what are some of these rules of blacksmithing? Well, one of the most obvious ones is get it hot, hit it hard. Or relatively the same thing, Francis Whitaker used to say there's two reasons for a blacksmith to go to hell. That is that he sells his work too cheap or beats cold iron. That's a pretty good rule. You can't really forge a lot of stuff cold. But is it a hard, fast rule? Well, probably if you've been paying attention to me here on the channel, you know I don't think that it's a hard, fast rule. It sounds like a good rule, but as you work something down from heat, it's your last heat, you're doing a little refining, you're cleaning up, and you take it down to a black heat, you end up knocking a lot of scale off, so you really don't do that final light forging at high heat. There are also other things that just simply can't take the high heat. Some tool steels are what they call red short, which means they start to fall apart if you get it too high a heat. So you need to keep the heat down a little bit. And there are other reasons you do things at colder heat. Some bending, some straightening are way better done cold than they are hot. So while it sounds good that you always work stuff hot, you're always got a fire going, yeah, well, maybe not. Maybe that's not such a hard, fast rule. Another good rule is square to octagon to round. I've mentioned this several times when we talk about drawing out material, that you should draw out, whether it's a round bar or a square bar, you draw it out in a square cross section, then you go to an octagonal cross section, then you finally go to round if that's what you're going for. And that's really a pretty good rule, or maybe it's a pretty good guideline, because it's not always a hard, fast rule. Sometimes when you're working under spring dies, such as under the power hammer, you're sort of going square, octagon, round, except that the die is already forging round as soon as you start. So you're really not doing it exactly that way. It's sort of close but not similar. Forging pipe, if you're making a candle cup in pipe, you end up creating corners in your pipe if you go square that ultimately are nearly impossible to get out, and it's way easier to keep the pipe round as you work the pipe. So you just draw that taper, or you create that step down in a round section. And one of the reasons I mention things like this is that you frequently hear terms like always and never. Never do this, always do this. You always need flux to weld. Well, if you pay attention to the British blacksmiths, you know a lot of them don't use flux to weld. You just simply don't need it. It's nice. I like to use flux. I feel like it just adds that little bit extra bonus in the plus column of heading for success, and you're more likely to have a successful weld. But it's not required. It's not a rule. So if you start thinking of blacksmithing in terms of always and never, you're going to limit yourself, and you're going to confuse yourself. You're going to go to a conference or a workshop, and somebody's going to be doing something that you thought you weren't supposed to do. Somebody's going to say, I've been doing it this way forever, or for this one instance, and there's usually is the case that they tend to do it the way you thought was the rule, but they have their exceptions, and you can learn a lot from that. And it's okay to experiment with that. It's okay to try going around these things and see what happens. What happens if you change the way you forge something? What happens if you forge it at a higher heat or a lower heat? And it's worth experimenting with those things. So don't get too hung up on the rules. I'm sure I presented some things that sound like rules, and I'm sure you will hear other things that sound like rules. And pay attention to those. They're probably good practices. They're probably based on some sort of proven success rate. But it's okay to deviate a little bit if you've got a reason to. It's okay to think outside the box, challenge those rules a little bit. Now, there are probably other rules that are not so variable. Things like never grab a piece of red hot iron with your bare hand. Okay, I'd probably say that's a good never ever do that rule, because if you do it, you're not going to be happy about it. And hopefully nobody's got an exception to that rule. But in general, I think if you think in blacksmithing in terms of always do it this way, never do it that way, you're just going to limit yourself. And that even brings us to my ending line, always wear your safety glasses. You know, if you're watching videos from other countries, you'll probably see a lot of people not wearing safety glasses, not wearing hearing protection. And that's just they have a different philosophy or different standard of safety than we do, particularly here in the U.S., and that doesn't mean that we should lower our guard and practice a lower standard of safety. I still think you should wear your safety glasses, but I'm not going to criticize people in other countries who simply don't have that standard. They've been working that way for a long time. There's probably a reason they get away with it. They're safe. They avoid the problem in the first place, and they don't use safety glasses as an excuse to do things they might not otherwise do. So it's all relative. Blacksmithing videos are full of things that I might think aren't safe, or you might think aren't safe, but for the person doing it, it's just their standard practice, and they've been doing it for years, and it's okay. So maybe we don't need to be so hard on them and tell them, hey, you're not following the rules that I learned. Now, I learned you should always do this. You should always wear a glove. You should never wear a glove. Never wear gloves around rotating machinery. Well, I kind of like to wear a glove around a grinder so I don't grind my knuckles, and lots of people do. I would say never wear a glove around a wire brush, but I'll bet there's somebody out there that's got a good reason for doing it and has some sort of safety practice in place so that they can get away with doing it. So, I don't know, just kind of a ramble, not really a rant, just an observation that there seems to be rules out there, and maybe we don't need to be quite too hung up on the rules. Look at them as best practices, good ideas, things we can learn from, things that probably won't steer us wrong, but there might be reasons to not follow the rules every time. So anyways, I do hope that was worth something to you. It's a short video, I know, but I got more work to do, and I'm going to get back to it. And I hope you can get to your shop and get to work. But I do think you should stay safe. And really, I do think you should wear your safety glasses, but I'm not going to come to your shop and duct tape them to your head. So We'll see you later.